At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Brian, who has some tips to share about avoiding burnout during the pandemic.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so let's just jump right in here. I mean, we've all been feeling the crunch here about dealing with this pandemic. Some of us have been locked down for quite a while. Some of us have been able to get back to work, but we've all felt the pandemic, the effects of it somewhere along the way. Everybody here in this call obviously is either business owner or a producer in your business. So I think that's a key element that a lot of people who maybe are not filling those kinds of roles just don't feel. And so it kind of came to the forefront for us, for a lot of our patients, to realize that, hey, this is a different level of stress, and that's really what we're working with here. So one of the things that we do, and we coach our patients this way, we coach our clients this way, is that there are really two elements that you have to deal with in terms of avoiding burnout and dealing with this extra stress through this pandemic. And they're related to what you should be doing anyway, even when there's not a pandemic going on. And the analogy that I like to use with people is a car pulling a trailer. There's all kinds of things that we can do to make that car as efficient as possible. If we're dragging a trailer that's got flat tires or even low air pressure, or it's overloaded, or there's something going on with the car itself where it's not functioning as well as it should, it's not been well maintained, you're going to burn a lot more fuel and not nearly make as much progress as you would if you were running proper air pressure in your trailer, the trailer was properly loaded, the car had been well maintained, all of those things. So the analogy carries over to us and to our bodies and how we function in this way. The trailer is all the stresses that we deal with every day. The stress of work, the stress of family, the stress of the pandemic, the stress of what's happening tomorrow, all of these extra stresses. And some of them we can control or influence, and some of them we cannot. The car part of the analogy is us and our bodies and how well are our bodies working. If we're not fueling our bodies with good nutrient-dense foods, we're not getting the fuel that we need, our body's not able to repair and regenerate itself like it could. If we're not getting enough sleep, we're not exercising, getting some sort of movement, we're not maintaining the internal workings of our body, that's that poor maintenance on the car. And so everything begins to break down. And what happens, especially with a pandemic, is this is an overload on the trailer that we have no control over, but we really have to focus on what are we doing with the other stresses in our life, and what are we doing with maintaining our physical bodies and how well we function. So much of this information I'm going to share with you is kind of common sense, and we've all heard it before, but it becomes even more important in this situation. So we said, fueling your body with nutrient dense foods. What does that look like? Well, the reality is most of us, if we boil it down, we're really meat and potatoes kind of people. Anybody a meat and potatoes person? Show of hands. Yeah, we're all kind of meat and potatoes people, right? We're missing a boatload of nutrients that our bodies absolutely have to have in order to repair themselves, regenerate, and even function on the proper level to get the most energy out of the foods that we're eating, the meat and potatoes that we are eating. And so some people say, well, I take a multivitamin. Okay, that's fine. But the reality is what you're getting in your multivitamin in most cases is not going to give your body what it needs because it's not truly bioavailable. And so what we coach with is, look, you've got to increase your plant-based consumption. I'm not anti-meat. I love a great steak and I eat them all the time. In fact, I prefer steak over chicken. But the reality is if we're not getting those good, dark, green, vegetable foods, we're not going to get the breadth or the spectrum of nutrients that we need to get. And so where do you start? Well, you start somewhere. You start where you are. That's the answer there. So add some green leafy vegetables, add some color. We coach our patients, eat the colors of the rainbow. The more variety of colors you can get in your diet, the better off you're going to be because you get a much wider variety of nutrients there. Okay, so that's the fuel side of things. How about exercise? Do we have to be bodybuilders? Do we have to be gym warriors? We have to get on the treadmill and spend 2 hours a day? Absolutely not. None of us has time for that. But we do have to do something. And again, so where do we start? We start where you're at. If you've not been doing anything, we go for a walk. And maybe it's a walk around your block. Maybe you're a little more fit than that, or you've been doing a little more than that. You go a little farther. One of the elements that gets missed a lot of times is we tend to focus on cardio, because we're talking about heart health. But the reality is, for most of us don't have the physical strength in the variety of muscles. There's over 600 of them in our bodies to do the things that we need to do. And so I'll give you a great example. My wife, and she would tell you this, I'm not going to tell you anything that she wouldn't tell you herself. She loves to run half marathons and marathons. She's not a small lady. She's built, she's got a very strong frame. And when she starts training for one of her half marathons, if she has not prepared her body through resistance training, through strength training prior to that point, she always ends up with an injury through training. Always. If she's done what needs to be done prior to that, by getting stronger, she usually gets through the season without an injury. So the reality is, for most of us, we need to add some of those elements in there, some sort of resistance training. It can be resistance bands, it can be free weights, it can be machines. It doesn't really matter, but you just have to do something to maintain the strength of your muscles, because we all know if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And muscles are a prime example of that. Sleep. What about sleep? Well, sleep's not that important, right? I'm a producer. I can get by on 2 to 3, 4 hours of sleep a night, right? Anybody else ever said that? No, nobody's ever said that, right? Yeah, I don't know if I believe you guys. I think we've all, at least, maybe we didn't say it, but we thought it, right? I used to say the same thing, and what I'm discovering and what I've discovered through my study of the human body is sleep is not an option. It's not an elective. You have to have sleep, because that's when your body repairs, resets, regenerates, processes many of the emotional and psychological stresses that we've dealt with throughout the day, and assimilates them into a way that it doesn't have as much of a detrimental effect on our bodies. So sleep quantity and quality. And there are things that we can do to work with you on that too. There's all kinds of options there. So people ask me, how much sleep is enough sleep? It depends. It depends. Most people need anywhere from 6 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And why do I say 6 to 9? Well, the reality is, when we look at sleep, we sleep in 90-minute cycles. Everybody's ever heard of REM, right? REM sleep. That's that deep dream, restful sleep, right? Where your REM cycle is about 90 minutes. And one of the things and it cycles like a sine wave, like this. We have peaks and we have troughs. And if you've ever woken up, if you've ever slept, let's say 8 hours, okay, and you woke up at 8 hours and you're just groggy and you're just really having a hard time waking up, odds are one of two things is happening. Either you're operating at a major deficit because you hadn't been sleeping enough prior to that, because every night builds on the ones before it, or you're waking up at a trough. And what the trough is, the peak and the trough, the higher the peak, the closer you are to conscious. The deeper the trough, the farther you are away from being conscious. And if you've got to cover this much ground to get to that level of consciousness, that's a big trough to climb out of, big hill to climb. We see that a lot. So we coach people, look, set your alarm. Let's go 6 hours or 7.5 hours or 9 hours. Let's figure out what works for you. And that's where your sweet spot is. All right. Those are some of the external things that we can do as far as our bodies go. Unhitching the trailer. One of the things that I found works great is I have to schedule myself. And guys, I am not a scheduler. I am a fly by the seat of my pants, react and respond kind of person. That's just the way I've always done things. But I have to grab my planner. I have to schedule things out, even projects I'm working on. And I work in sprints. I work in 45-minute sprints. Block out 45 minutes for this project and go, and head down, tail up, as my dad used to say. Work, 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 work. And when the timer goes off, take 10 to 15 minutes, take a breather, get some water, get up and move around a little bit, come back and get ready for the next sprint. Amazing how much more productive I am when I do that. And stop multitasking. There is no such thing as multitasking, folks. There's only task switching. And when you task switch, you have to change your mindset from one to the other, and there's a ramp up phase. We've got to stay focused on what's going on. And I know that sounds crazy when we're talking about avoiding burnout during a pandemic, but the reality is our day is defined by how much we can get done, how productive we can be during that day. And you will be surprised at how much you can get done. Normally would take this long, now can take this long. And so you can either do one of two things. You can add more on and get more done, or now you can take part of your life back and you can put some time into that exercise and that good nutrition and that sleep we're talking about. So you're finding places to take part of your life back and invest that into yourself. Let's see what's next. Task switching, scheduling. I apologize. I'm remembering my outline here. It's not in front of me. Oh, I know what I was going to say about scheduling. Part of why I've resisted scheduling, because I like to be just going with the flow, going with the flow. And a good friend of mine, actually one of my coaches, taught me, he said, structure creates freedom. And I said, wait a minute, that doesn't even make any sense. Structure sounds restrictive to me. And he said, no, when you structure yourself, remember 45-minute sprints? That freedom comes in when in the white spaces in my calendar. My color coded spaces are where I'm working on projects or I'm seeing patients. My white spaces are those spaces in between. And that's where the freedom comes, because I know I've got a break coming. I know I've got time to do something for me. Obviously I can't play euchre by myself, but I can go and do something else. I can go get a snack, or I can go move around a little bit. I can go shoot hoops for a few minutes just to get the blood flowing and get some movement going. Um, I'm a shooter. I love to go to the gun range, and so 15 minutes is not long enough to do that. But I can find some white space in my day to create some opportunity to go to the range and take target practice, those kinds of things. So again, doing something for ourselves, which is that last element. There is, you've got to take time for you. You're working hard. Why are you working hard? Well, we all work hard to make a living, right? But we're working hard to make a living. Why? It's not just about the money. If it's just about the money, we're wasting our time. But the money can be a tool to buy back some time and enjoy some time and some things that we want to do for ourselves and our families. That's what the money is all about. It's just a tool. It's just a fancy hammer that folds up nice and soft and warm and goes with everything, right? So that's kind of those things. Now, the last element, and this is one that gets overlooked a lot of times. How am I doing on time, Ryan?
You still have plenty of time.
Okay, great. So the last element is one that gets overlooked a lot of times because we don't think about our bodies this way and the way our bodies function. And we just go, 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 go. And most people know a little bit about how our bodies work. But one element that we don't know about very much is because we don't spend any time on it, is our central nervous system. Now, why am I talking about our central nervous system? Well, because I'm a chiropractor. That's what we work with as chiropractors. Our central nervous system is the primary system of our bodies. It controls everything that happens. Every cell, every tissue, and every organ in our bodies is connected to the organ that's under our hat, right? And what does that mean? Well, so our bodies function like a big information loop. And I've got a great example here, and I had to steal this from my mom's sewing kit while we're here in Florida. Everybody recognizes what that is. That's a safety pin, okay? So our bodies operate, our nervous systems operate like a safety pin. And the way you look at this, the analogy is the head of the pin, that's like your brain, okay? The spring down here, that is, and we can pick an organ, it doesn't really matter, but let's call it our stomach. The stomach's a great example. Normally, under normal conditions, when we eat a meal, food goes into our stomach, and our stomach has specialized stretch receptors in the wall of the stomach that send a message to the brain that says, hey, food just jumped in here, what do we do? And the brain formulates a message and a series of messages and sends a message down one side, down the nervous system, down to the stomach that says you need to increase hydrochloric acid production, you need to increase intrinsic factor production, you need to increase the fluid that's in the stomach. We're getting ready to digest this food. And so the stomach gets a message that says, okay, we'll do that. Great. And it does that. And then it sends a message back to the brain and says, okay, we did that. And the brain says, okay, you got to keep going for a little bit. When we get the food digested and it gets pushed out of the stomach down into the small intestine, it shrinks again. So it sends a different message up to the brain. And the brain gets that message and says, okay, you're empty now. You can shut down production. You can slow that down. We don't need to keep producing all that acid and all that intrinsic factor. Stomach gets the message and it does exactly what it's supposed to do. The problem is when we have too much stress in our lives, it accumulates in our lives, and our bodies have a defense mechanism that we call a subluxation. And what a subluxation is, the analogy there, and I know I'm mixing analogies here, but the analogy or the metaphor there is, if we go to a rock concert, we sit right in front of the speakers, it's going to be really, really loud. And if we don't do something to protect our hearing, like covering our ears with earmuffs, we're going to blow out our eardrums. And so we put our earmuffs on, we enjoy the concert, we're right there, right on the stage, we can smell the sweat of the rock stars, right? Kind of gross, but we all been there, right? At some point in our younger days. But you're sitting there and it's a great concert, have a great time, great memories. And you and I are there together. This concert gets over and we head out to the car, but we forget to take off the earmuffs. How well are we going to be able to communicate? Not very well, right? Well, that's like a subluxation. The subluxation is something that our bodies create within ourselves and the way our nervous systems communicate to protect us from an overload of stressors that accumulate on our bodies and can have a detrimental effect. The challenge is those subluxations don't usually correct themselves very well. And going back to the safety pin, the analogy of the subluxation is if that loop of information were like this. So the brain creates the messages, sends it to the stomach The stomach does what it's supposed to do, and it sends the message back to the brain, but it never makes it to the brain. So the brain keeps sending those messages because it thinks it didn't get through. Now the stomach is producing excess acid, excess intrinsic factor. And if anybody's ever had acid reflux or indigestion, you know what that result feels like. That's what happens here. What chiropractic does, and this is what people don't understand about chiropractic a lot of times, they think we're a fix for back pain and neck pain. What we do is effectively, functionally reconnect the loop. So the brain and the body can protect themselves and can adapt and can communicate properly. So what does that have to do with avoiding burnout? Well, it has to do with avoiding burnout because this loop that we talked about with the stomach, there's a similar loop functionally, not physically, but functionally between our brain and our heart, between our brain and our digestion. Our brain and itself, actually, our brain has to be able to reset itself, and it's dependent on this information coming back up the other side over here to get the information that needs to be able to have to reset itself and kind of clean the slate. And that can happen while we're sleeping if we're getting enough good quality sleep at night and we're living subluxation free. So the question people always ask me, well, that sounds really bad. How do I know if I have subluxation? I'd have pain, right? Not necessarily. Anybody ever had a cavity in their tooth? Yeah, pretty much all of us at some point, or we've known somebody who has. And maybe you woke up and you didn't know you had it. Man, you had a toothache that morning, and you go to the dentist, and the dentist says, "You got a cavity. We got to clean that out, or we got to pull that tooth." Did the cavity develop when the symptoms started? Absolutely not. It had been developing for weeks or months or years prior to that. It just hadn't been caught. Subluxation is a lot like that. And so what we do is, as chiropractors, we evaluate and measure for subluxation patterns and then develop a plan to help your body let those subluxation patterns go and create normal neurological functions so that your body and brain can start talking to each other, so that good nutrition and that good sleep and that good exercise, those good stressors that you're subjecting yourself to, can now have a much greater positive impact in your body, and you've effectively lightened the load of the trailer and increased the efficiency of your car. So things work so much better and you can produce a lot more, make a lot more progress. All of that allows you to then, anybody heard the word in the last 6 months, pivot? Pivoting your business? Yeah, we're all talking about it, right? We've got to pivot how we're marketing. We've got to pivot how we're seeing clients. We've got to pivot everything, right? Well, that pivoting is adaptation. You've got to be able to adapt and adapt quickly and adapt efficiently. In order to be able to do that, the slate has to be clean. The machine has to be working smoothly. So that's it. I hope y'all were taking notes. I threw a lot at you. Sometimes I feel like people are drinking from a fire hose when I open my mouth. So I hope that was helpful. I don't know, Ryan, do we open it up for questions? I'm certainly willing to answer any questions people might have.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and ask.
I usually use a planner and mix it with my calendar. How do you go about planning your day?
We've been on the hunt for the right planner for us, and there are probably as many planner options out there as there are people who plan. We actually just bought one. I used the Passion Planner this last year, and it was a little cumbersome for me, a little clunky for me. We are trying to commit 30 tool. That's the tool we're using. Trying to commit 30 for 2021. Planning wise, I try to plan my week. I want to determine how my week is going to go, and I usually do that on Sundays. Obviously, there has to be some flexibility there because things happen. But we review the plan for the day, the night before, and then again the morning of, to make sure that nothing has come up that we need to shift some things around. I write my planner in pencil. I don't ever write my planner in pen, except for bills. Bills being due go in the planner in pen, and they're color coded, so we know what's business and what's home. So, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Yeah, shoot.
So what are some tips that you could recommend for making sure you're tired when you're supposed to be going to bed?
That's a really great question. Okay. So making sure you're tired when you're supposed to go to bed. If you're not tired, and this has been my experience, now I don't know your situation, Ryan, so I'm speaking in generalities here. But from my experience with my patients and for myself personally, if I'm not tired when I'm going to bed, it probably means I didn't move enough that day. I didn't have enough deliberate movement exercise is what I'm getting at there in my day. And now this is one of those things you kind of have to experiment and find what works for you, is that I cannot exercise at night. If I exercise at night, I'm up till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It wakes me up and I cannot get to sleep. I have to exercise in the morning or at midday. But that's a key element for me and a lot of my clients is if they're not tired when they're ready to go to bed, they're not getting enough movement in the day. So we work to revamp that schedule a little bit and find a way to work that in.
Awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Dr. Brian?
Gee, guys, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
I think the cold has something to do with it today.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's probably true. I can't relate. I think it's 83 here right now. Sorry.
Not nice.
Sorry. Had to throw it out there. I'm actually.
That'll keep me up tonight.
What's that?
That'll keep me up tonight.
Being 83 where I'm at?
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Oh, yeah. I get it.
Yeah, it's a whole blistering 40 degrees here.
Yeah, we checked the weather when we first woke up this morning. I think in Noblesville it was 28.
Yes.
I said, I'm really glad we're in Cape Coral.
Awesome. Well, let's give Dr. Brian a hand for bringing his tips to the group today.